If you think your current government is a circus, you haven't seen anything yet. We are tracking down 33 ancient leaders who possessed absolute power but negative IQ. From the general who declared war on the ocean to the emperor who sold the world for a quick cash grab, these aren't just mistakes. They are legendary disasters. Prepare to lose all faith in humanity. 1. Let's start with King You of Zhou, a man who took the concept of the boy who cried wolf and turned it into a suicide mission just to impress a girl. This Chinese ruler from the 8th century BC was desperate to make his favorite concubine smile, but she was notoriously grumpy and hard to please. So he came up with a genius idea. He lit the emergency war beacons on the Great Wall, signaling that the capital was under attack. His loyal nobles rushed in with their armies, sweating and ready to die for him, only to find the king chilling with his girlfriend, who finally laughed at the confused and out-of-breath soldiers. It was so funny that he did it again later. But here is the kicker. When real barbarians actually showed up to invade, the king lit the fires in a panic, and the nobles just rolled their eyes and stayed home, thinking it was another prank. The king was killed, and his dynasty collapsed, all because he was the ultimate simp. 2. If you think your boss is toxic, wait until you hear about Phalaris, the tyrant of Akragas in Sicily. This guy was a special kind of monster, but he was also the victim of the most ironic karma in recorded history. A bronze worker named Phalaris wanted to suck up to the tyrant, so he built a hollow bronze bull. The idea was to lock a victim inside and light a fire underneath, roasting them alive while a series of pipes turned their screams into the sound of a bellowing bull. Phalaris looked at this horrific invention and said to the creator, "Hey, get inside and show me how the acoustics work." As soon as the inventor climbed in, Phalaris locked the door and lit the fire, making the creator the first victim of his own masterpiece. But do not worry, justice was eventually served. When the city finally overthrew Phalaris, guess where they threw him? That is right, straight into the bull for a final barbecue. 3. History often compares Emperor Hui of Jin to Marie Antoinette. But honestly, that is an insult to Marie Antoinette because this guy was on a whole other level of cluelessness. He ruled China during a time of severe famine and chaos, completely detached from the reality of his suffering people. His panicked officials came to him one day, reporting that the peasants were starving to death by the thousands because there was absolutely no rice left to eat. The emperor looked at them, genuinely confused, and asked a question that has gone down in history as the peak of stupidity. He said, "If they have no rice, why do they not just eat meat porridge?" He was not trying to be mean. He was just so incredibly sheltered that he thought ground meat was a standard backup pantry item for people who could not even afford grain. Needless to say, his reign was a total disaster that sparked a massive civil war. 4. We have to talk about Chrysippus, the Greek philosopher who proves that dad jokes can literally be fatal. He was a brilliant Stoic thinker, the kind of guy who wrote over 700 books on logic and ethics, but his sense of humor was a bit basic. One day, he saw a donkey eating his figs. Instead of chasing it away, he thought this was the funniest thing he had ever seen in his entire life. He yelled to his slave to give the donkey some fine wine to wash down the figs. He then started laughing at his own joke. And he kept laughing. He laughed so uncontrollably that he went into a seizure, suffered cardiac arrest, and died on the spot. Imagine having an IQ that high, surviving wars and plagues, only to be taken out by a drunk donkey and your own terrible sense of humor. That is certainly a memorable way to exit the chat. 5. Being the richest man in Rome was not enough for Crassus, whose ego was even bigger than his bank account. He was insanely jealous of the military glory of his rivals, Caesar and Pompey, so he decided to buy himself some war hero status. He invaded the Parthian Empire despite having zero experience fighting in the desert and ignoring every single bad omen. He marched his heavy legions straight into a trap at the Battle of Carrhae, where the Parthian horse archers used them for target practice. It was a massacre. Crassus was captured, and according to a very popular and brutal legend, the Parthians decided to punish his legendary greed in a poetic way. They melted down gold and poured it straight down his throat, saying, "If you are so hungry for gold, drink this." It turns out you cannot actually buy tactical intelligence, no matter how rich you are. 6. There are bad military decisions, and then there is Caligula's war on Poseidon. This Roman emperor was known for being completely unhinged, but his campaign against Britain took the cake for absolute absurdity. He marched his massive, highly trained army all the way to the northern coast of Gaul, facing the English Channel. But instead of loading them onto ships to fight the Britons, he declared war on Neptune, the god of the sea. He ordered his confused legions to line up on the beach and throw their spears into the water to teach the ocean a lesson. After attacking the waves, he declared victory and ordered the soldiers to collect seashells, filling their helmets with them as spoils of war to be displayed back in Rome. Imagine being a battle-hardened veteran forced to pick up sea snails because your boss is hallucinating a war with water. 7. Let's look at Milo of Croton, who was the ancient equivalent of a superstar athlete with zero common sense. He was a 6-time Olympic wrestling champion with superhuman strength, but as we know, muscles do not equal brains. One day, Milo was walking alone in the woods and saw a tree trunk that had been partially split open with wedges. Feeling arrogant and wanting to test his gains, he decided to rip the tree apart with his bare hands just to show off to the squirrels. He pulled the trunk open, the wedges fell out, and the tree snapped back together, trapping his hands inside the wood like a vice. He was stuck there, screaming for help, but since this was ancient Greece and not a gym, there was nobody around. By the time night fell, a pack of wolves arrived, and the strongest man in the world was eaten alive because he lost a fight with a tree. 8. Talk about the worst impulse buy in human history. After the Emperor Pertinax was murdered, the Praetorian Guard did something insane and announced they would sell the Roman Empire to the highest bidder. Didius Julianus, a wealthy but dim-witted senator, ran to the camp and started a literal bidding war against another guy, shouting out higher prices from the bottom of the wall. He eventually won by promising 25,000 sestertii to every single soldier. He bought the throne, but he forgot that money cannot buy respect or safety. The people hated him, the Senate hated him, and 3 different generals immediately marched on Rome to kill him. His investment lasted exactly 66 days before he was executed in the palace. He spent his entire fortune to be the emperor for a devastatingly short and stressful summer vacation. 9. King Cambyses II of Persia is the perfect example of why you should never make decisions when you are hangry or paranoid. First, he sent a massive army of 50,000 men into the Egyptian desert to conquer an oasis, but he forgot one tiny detail, which was hiring local guides. The entire army walked into a sandstorm and literally vanished from history, never to be seen again. Then, back in Egypt, he saw the locals celebrating and assumed they were laughing at his military failure. It was actually a festival for the sacred Apis bull, but Cambyses was so insecure that he stabbed the holy bull in the thigh to prove it was not a god. The bull died, the Egyptians were horrified, and karma worked fast. Not long after, Cambyses accidentally stabbed himself in the thigh while mounting his horse in the exact same spot and died from the infection. 10. If you have ever seen a loud internet troll suddenly get put in charge of a country, you will understand Cleon of Athens. He was a leather tanner who built his career by screaming at generals and calling them cowards in the assembly. During the war with Sparta, he bragged that if he were in command, he would win the war in 20 days. The assembly, tired of his noise, basically said, "Fine, you do it," and gave him the army as a joke. Through sheer dumb luck and the help of a real general, he actually won. But this victory inflated his ego to dangerous levels. He marched out to fight the Spartans again, thinking he was a tactical genius. The moment the Spartans charged, Cleon realized he had no idea what he was doing, turned to run away, and was speared in the back, proving that luck is definitely not a strategy. 11. We cannot forget Elagabalus, the teenage Roman emperor who treated the empire like his personal frat house. This 14-year-old boy was less interested in taxes and more interested in pranks that could kill you. He would release poisonous snakes and leopards into the crowd at Gladiator games just to see people panic. He also replaced the head of the Roman Pantheon with a giant black meteorite he dragged all the way from Syria, and he forced high-ranking senators to watch him dance around it. He even married a Vestal virgin, which was a massive religious crime, claiming their children would be godlike. He was so chaotic and annoying that his own grandmother eventually looked at him, looked at the Praetorian Guard, and gave the nod. They dragged him through the streets and threw his body into the Tiber River like common trash. 12. Qin Shi Huang was the man who united China and built the Great Wall, but he was also terrified of dying to the point of insanity. He was obsessed with finding the elixir of immortality and punished anyone who failed to bring him results. His alchemists and doctors, terrified of being executed, eventually whipped up a special magic potion that they claimed would make him live forever. The main ingredient? Mercury. Lots and lots of mercury. The emperor believed them and started drinking toxic heavy metal smoothies on a regular basis. Ironically, the thing he took to extend his life is exactly what killed him. He slowly went mad from poisoning and died at age 49, proving that listening to yes-men doctors who prescribe liquid metal is perhaps the worst health plan in history. 13. You know the term Pyrrhic victory? It is named after Pyrrhus of Epirus, a brilliant general who was terrible at math. He kept fighting the Romans and winning battles, but he lost so many of his own elite soldiers that he famously said, "If we are victorious in one more battle with the Romans, we shall be utterly ruined." He was winning himself into extinction. But his death was the real punchline. After surviving bloody wars against the greatest powers of the Mediterranean, he was fighting in a street skirmish in the city of Argos. An old woman, watching from a rooftop, saw Pyrrhus fighting her son. She grabbed a heavy roof tile and threw it down. It hit Pyrrhus right on the neck, paralyzing him, and allowed a soldier to finish him off. The greatest warrior of his age was taken out by a granny with a piece of ceramic. 14. Julian the Apostate wanted to be the new Alexander the Great, but he ended up making one of the worst logistical decisions ever. While invading the Persian Empire, he marched his army deep into enemy territory down the Euphrates River, accompanied by a massive fleet of supply ships. When he reached a point where the river route ended, he decided to march inland. To motivate his soldiers and ensure they would not retreat, he ordered his entire fleet of ships to be burned. It looked cool, sure, but he also burned all their extra food and their only ride home. When the campaign stalled and the Persians used scorched earth tactics, the Romans were stranded in the desert with no supplies and no way back. Julian died in a skirmish, leaving his starving army to wonder why their boss thought arson was a good motivational tool. 15. Xerxes I brings us the ultimate Karen moment of the ancient world. During his massive invasion of Greece, he built a pontoon bridge across the Hellespont to move his army. But nature had other plans, and a storm destroyed the bridge. A normal person would just build another one, but Xerxes took it personally. He flew into a rage and declared war on the water itself. He ordered his soldiers to whip the sea 300 times with chains and shout insults at it. He even threw a pair of shackles into the water to symbolize that the ocean was now his slave. Imagine being a Persian soldier, standing on the beach, whipping a wave while your king screams at the tide. Surprisingly, the ocean did not seem to care, but it definitely made Xerxes look like a total maniac. 16. Finally, let's talk about Varus, the Roman general who trusted the wrong guy at the absolute wrong time. Varus was in charge of Germania and thought he was on a friendly camping trip. He befriended a Germanic prince named Arminius, treating him like a son. When Arminius said, "Hey, there is a rebellion over there, let's take a shortcut through this dark, swampy forest," Varus blindly agreed. He ignored other chieftains, who literally told him Arminius was a traitor. Varus marched 3 entire legions into the Teutoburg forest, right into a perfect ambush prepared by his best friend. The Romans were wiped out in the mud. It was such a disaster that the Emperor Augustus spent months banging his head against a wall screaming, "Varus, give me back my legions," proving that sometimes being too nice is a fatal flaw. 17. Herostratus is officially the grandfather of toxic clout chasing. Back in ancient Ephesus, this guy was a nobody who desperately wanted to be famous, but he had no talent and no skills. So, he decided to take a shortcut. He walked up to the Temple of Artemis, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and set it on fire, burning the magnificent structure to the ground. When he was caught and tortured, he happily admitted that he did it just so his name would be immortalized in history. The Ephesians were so disgusted that they not only executed him but passed a law forbidding anyone to ever speak his name again, hoping to erase him from memory. But obviously, that plan failed miserably because here we are, thousands of years later, talking about him. He basically trolled the entire ancient world and won. 18. Talk about suffering from success. Mithridates, the 6th of Pontus, was the arch-enemy of Rome and arguably the most paranoid man who ever lived. He was so terrified of being assassinated that he spent his entire life taking small microdoses of every known poison to build up an immunity. He became known as the Poison King. It worked perfectly until it didn't. When he was finally defeated by the Romans and faced capture, he decided to take the honorable way out and downed a massive cup of lethal poison. But thanks to his lifetime of preparation, his body just shrugged it off like it was water. He sat there, awkwardly alive and frustrated, until he had to beg his own bodyguard to draw a sword and stab him to death. He is the only man in history who failed at suicide because he was too healthy. 19. Maxentius brings us a classic Wile E. Coyote moment from Roman history. During his civil war against Constantine the Great, Maxentius decided to defend Rome at the Milvian Bridge. He came up with a cunning plan to build a pontoon bridge alongside the real one, which was rigged to collapse in the middle so he could drown Constantine's army when they crossed. It was a giant trap. But during the battle, Maxentius's army panicked and began to retreat. In the chaos and confusion, Maxentius forgot which bridge was safe and led his own men onto the trapped pontoon bridge. The trap worked perfectly, collapsing under their weight and dumping the emperor into the Tiber River, where he drowned in his heavy armor. He literally fell for his own prank and lost the empire because of it. 20. Attila the Hun was the scourge of God, a terrifying warrior who ravaged empires and made Rome tremble in fear. You would expect a man like this to die in an epic duel or a blaze of glory, right? Wrong. Attila died because he partied too hard. On the night of his latest wedding to a beautiful young woman named Ildiko, Attila celebrated by drinking massive amounts of wine. He passed out in a drunken stupor on his back. While he was sleeping, he suffered a severe nosebleed. Because he was too drunk to wake up or roll over, the blood drained down his throat and he choked to death on his own fluids. The man who nearly destroyed Western civilization was not taken out by a sword or an arrow, but by an open bar and gravity. 21. Alexander of Epirus, the uncle of Alexander the Great, proves that you should always read the fine print on prophecies. An oracle warned him to beware of the river Acheron and the city of Pandocia, telling him that is where he would die. Thinking he was smart, he left Greece because those places were there, and sailed to Italy to fight wars, thinking he was safe. He spent years campaigning there, only to get trapped by enemies near a river during a heavy storm. As he tried to cross the turbulent water, someone shouted the name of the local river to warn him. It was, of course, the river Acheron. He realized too late that there was more than one river with that name. He hesitated in panic and was struck down by a javelin, killed by the very destiny he traveled thousands of miles to avoid. 22. If you want to know how to lose an army in one afternoon, look at the Roman consul Terentius Varro. He was an arrogant politician who thought he knew better than the seasoned generals. Facing Hannibal, the greatest tactician of the age, Varro insisted on engaging him on the open plains of Cannae, which is exactly where you do not want to fight a cavalry-heavy army. His co-consul begged him not to, but Varro was in charge that day and ordered the attack. He packed the Roman legions into a tight, inflexible block, marching them straight into Hannibal's trap. The Romans were encircled and slaughtered in the deadliest day of Roman history, with 50,000 men dying. Varro, of course, was one of the few who managed to run away and survive, leaving his soldiers to pay the price for his ego. 23. Sometimes, having one job is too complicated for some people. Antiochus was the pilot and best friend of the Athenian admiral Alcibiades, During the Peloponnesian War, Alcibiades had to leave the fleet for a few days and left Antiochus in charge with one strict, simple order, which was, do not fight the Spartans under any circumstances. Antiochus immediately decided he knew better. He wanted glory, so he took a few ships and sailed right up to the Spartan fleet to taunt them. The Spartan admiral Lysander was not amused. He launched his entire fleet, sank Antiochus, and then crushed the unprepared Athenian navy. Antiochus died, lost the fleet, and effectively lost the war for Athens, all because he could not sit still and follow a simple instruction to do absolutely nothing. 24. Finally, we have Commodus, the Roman emperor who is essentially the poster child for ancient cringe. He was the son of the wise philosopher Marcus Aurelius, proving that intelligence is not genetic. Commodus had zero interest in ruling. He only wanted to be a gladiator. He would dress up as Hercules wearing a lion skin and fight in the Colosseum, but he did not fight fair. He fought injured veterans and people with physical disabilities, clubbing them to death while the crowd watched in horror. He also fought ostriches and giraffes, thinking this made him a hero. The senators were forced to watch and cheer, terrified that if they didn't clap, he would kill them too. He was eventually strangled in his bath by his wrestling partner, ending the most embarrassing chapter in Roman history. 25. If you are looking for a bodyguard, here is a pro tip. Do not hire the guy whose resume is just a list of people he has betrayed. Dong Zhuo was a brutal warlord who seized control of the Han Dynasty capital, burning the city and treating the emperor like a puppet. He was paranoid about assassination, so he hired Lu Bu, the mightiest warrior in China, to be his personal bodyguard and adopted son. The problem was that Lu Bu was famous for killing his previous adoptive father for a bag of gold. Dong Zhuo ignored this red flag completely. Eventually, Dong Zhuo got into an argument with Lu Bu, reportedly over a girl, and threw a small hand axe at him. Lu Bu did not take this well. He conspired with the ministers and slaughtered Dong Zhuo at the palace gates, proving that hiring a serial traitor is a terrible HR strategy. 26. The Roman Emperor Valerian holds the humiliating record of being the first emperor to be captured alive by a foreign enemy, and his life after capture was a total nightmare. He led his army against the Persian Empire but was outmaneuvered and taken prisoner by King Shapur I. Instead of being treated with the dignity of a ruler, Valerian was turned into a literal piece of furniture. According to historical accounts, whenever King Shapur wanted to mount his horse, he would drag the Roman emperor out of his cage, force him to get on his hands and knees, and use his back as a human stepping stool. Valerian spent years being humiliated like this, serving as a footrest for the enemy king, until he eventually died, at which point Shapur had him flayed and stuffed with straw as a trophy. 27. Teenagers make bad decisions, but Ptolemy XIII made one that destroyed his entire kingdom. He was the boy king of Egypt who was fighting a civil war against his sister, Cleopatra. When the Roman general Pompey fled to Egypt seeking refuge after losing to Julius Caesar, Ptolemy thought he could score some major political points. He ordered Pompey to be assassinated and cut off his head. When Caesar arrived in Egypt, Ptolemy proudly presented him with the severed head of his old rival, expecting a high five. Instead, Caesar was horrified and burst into tears because Pompey was a fellow Roman and his former son-in-law. Caesar was so angry at the disrespect that he sided with Cleopatra, kicked Ptolemy off the throne, and the boy king drowned in the Nile while trying to run away. 28. Be very careful when you ask for advice from a fortune teller, especially if you are Chrysippus, the king of Lydia. He was fabulously wealthy and considered attacking the rising Persian Empire. To be sure of victory, he sent expensive gifts to the Oracle of Delphi and asked what would happen if he went to war. The oracle gave him the famous line, "If you cross the river Halys, you will destroy a great empire." Chrysippus was thrilled, thinking this meant he would crush the Persians. He launched the attack, lost horribly, and was captured. It was only while he was being dragged away in chains that he realized the oracle was right all along. He did destroy a great empire. It just happened to be his own. He basically paid a fortune to get trolled by a priestess. 29. Nicias was an Athenian general who let superstition turn a bad situation into a total catastrophe. He was leading the massive Athenian expedition against Sicily, which was already going poorly. He finally agreed that it was time to retreat and save the fleet. But just as they were packing up, a lunar eclipse occurred. Nicias was terrified and asked the priest what to do. They told him he had to wait thrice 9 days, or 27 days before moving. A competent general would have ignored this, but Nicias sat there for a month, doing absolutely nothing while the enemy surrounded him. By the time the 27 days were up, the Syracusans had blocked the harbor mouth with chains. The entire Athenian fleet was trapped and destroyed, and Nicias was executed, all because he was afraid of the moon. 30. The Roman Emperor Valens is the patron saint of impatience. In the year 378, a massive Gothic army was revolting near Adrianople. Valens marched out to meet them, and he knew that his nephew, the Western Emperor Gratian, was rushing to help him with a huge army of reinforcements. Gratian was only a few days away. But Valens was jealous of his nephew's success and didn't want to share the glory of victory. He decided to attack the Goths alone without waiting. It was a fatal mistake. The Gothic cavalry smashed into the exhausted Roman lines and wiped them out. Valens was injured and carried to a nearby cottage, which the Goths promptly set on fire. The emperor burned to death because he had a bad case of FOMO and couldn't wait for backup. 31. Empedocles was a Greek philosopher who had a brain the size of a planet but an ego the size of a galaxy. He truly believed he was a god walking among mortals. He claimed he could control the wind, bring the dead back to life, and that he was immortal. To prove his divinity to his skeptical followers once and for all, he hiked up to the summit of Mount Etna, an active volcano. He told everyone he would jump in and be absorbed by the gods, leaving no trace behind. He leaped into the lava and vanished. It seemed like he was right, until the volcano burped and spit out exactly one bronze sandal. That single shoe landed on the rim of the crater, serving as hilarious proof that Empedocles was not a god, but just a very crispy philosopher with poor decision-making skills. 32. Stress kills. But in the case of Emperor Valentinian I, it was literally his own temper that did him in. He was a capable ruler but had legendary anger management issues. One day, envoys from the Quadi tribe came to negotiate a peace treaty. They gave him some lame excuses for why they had been raiding Roman territory. Valentinian listened to them and started to get annoyed. Then he got angry. Then he exploded into a blind rage, screaming at the top of his lungs, his face turning purple as he berated the terrified barbarians. Suddenly he stopped mid-scream, grabbed his head, and collapsed. He had yelled so hard that he burst a blood vessel in his brain and died of a stroke on the spot. He is the only world leader to literally rage-quit life during a diplomatic meeting. 33. Closing out our list is Queen Tuda of Illyria, the pirate queen who forgot the golden rule of politics, which is do not shoot the messenger. Her subjects were busy raiding Roman merchant ships, so Rome sent 2 ambassadors to complain and ask her to stop the piracy. Tuda laughed in their faces, telling them that piracy was just part of their royal custom, and she would not stop it. When the youngest Roman ambassador got a little sassy and criticized her, she did not just kick him out, she had him murdered on his voyage home. This was a fatal error. Rome was not a nation you wanted to annoy. In response to this one murder, Rome launched a massive invasion force, crossed the Adriatic Sea, and completely crushed her kingdom, proving that having a thin skin can cost you an entire empire. We just witnessed 33 absolute disasters, but let's be real. Stupidity is the only human resource that never runs out. I know I missed someone even worse. Who is the one historical figure that makes these guys look like geniuses? Is it a modern politician or another ancient fool? Drop the name in the comments, roast my list, and hit subscribe before you make a mistake as bad as these guys.